So I'm pushing this question out to you, my subscribers, my viewers, my supporters, and how I think of it, how I approach it, my virtual gaming friends. We've got this community thing going here on YouTube, pulling in the various interests and narratives and systems that we're passionate about. And I want to ask the question, next steps. I've been taking a look at my channel. I've been taking stock, seeing what videos have momentum and what some of the questions and kind of themes that current running through. And I've been writing down a couple of ideas. Of course, we're going to continue with the tactics. Of course, we're going to continue to explore the systems that I enjoy playing as I try things out on the tabletop. And as always, with the feedback, I'm going to try and build on that. With the comments that you guys leave, I always build on that and try to see what direction that takes on the tabletop. But those next steps. So I have a couple of ideas. I'm going to push them out there. And then, of course, as always, comments, feedback, flames, thoughts, not only on these topics, but also on maybe some other topics. Hey, Fritz, can we take a look at this? Can we explore these aspects? So the first is Battletech. I mean, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, Battletech is a massive influence, and it's been a massive influence. And I've tried to really do two things at the same time. And it's all because of Catalyst and the new releases. The first was, of course, to share my passion, share some tactica, share some ideas, but also switching, being able to pivot and realize that we are in the golden age of Battletech right now. And just speaking for my local meta, we have seen more Battletech players, new players, brand new players. A few friends of mine drop in the code being like, hey, I've been playing Battletech. And I'm like, what? Like, that's crazy. How did you discover it? Just this idea of the starter sets, the plastics, the reemergence of the community. I've been trying to focus on some starter set series, looking at the starter sets, looking at some of the common mechs that you're going to face, exploring different scenarios, basically trying to look and say, you know, if I had some of this tactica back in the beginning, back in the day, maybe it would have cut down on that learning curve a little bit. So that leads me into thinking I've tended to focus on mechs that I exclusively play. And in the Battletech playlist under the channel here, the archives, you're going to find many of the favorite mechs that I like to revisit. I've also offered commentary on mechs that I've faced. So there are some machines, surprisingly, that I don't have in my collection for various reasons. One day I will. You know how that goes. Just when you think your collection is good and you're done, bam, next thing, new pile of metal or plastics arrive. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. That's the nature of miniature wargaming. So I tend to offer some commentary on mechs and machines and vehicles that I've faced, what works in my opinion, what doesn't work. But I was thinking about something a little more comprehensive. Would there be value in literally taking the technical manuals, starting with the Inner Sphere Succession era, sitting down and going A to Z? Now, this is not going to happen like instantly, but make this the focus of a project, A to Z, and go through there, tag it, load it up, so we have not only my opinion and my experiences, but again, the comments are gold. Some of this feedback I want to keep secret. It's like I want like the Battletech forum, we're going to keep this secret to ourselves because you guys have some really, really amazing insights. But to have that correspond with the tech manuals where you could have that as a reference for new players, for existing players. So really looking out there, A to Z, and just work our way through and eventually make it to the clans. I find in my own notes and my own looking back at kind of battle reports and thinking about things, I've got a lot of clan stuff that is out there, but because I usually don't play clans, or I should say 80% of my Battletech games, 90% are Inner Sphere. And I love the clans and I love that tech level, but there's still a vast amount of stuff that we need to explore. We need to ask those questions. We need to build that tactica checklist and look at. So would there be value reviewing mechs A to Z tech manual? Board games. So I've been playing a lot more board games. I mean, I guess it's just the nature of how things are right now. And more, it's interesting because the lines kind of blur. Am I playing a miniatures game, a skirmish game, or a war game. A perfect example, God Tier, which has captured a lot of my momentum recently, that's a miniatures skirmish-based game. That's a skirmish-based game. It's not a board game. But yet when I play Conan, the board game, it is a board game. It's an overlord system, one versus many. One player controls the minions and the bosses, and other players each control a character. If I step back for a moment, the fluidity of the game and the way it plays, even though it's on a set board and it's a board game, this is a skirmish-based game. So, more and more, there's a lot of tactical value, and there's a lot of decision-making that I find that I'm making. I'm playing for the narrative, of course. I'm playing for that analog experience to kind of unwind, see the possibilities, cast the dice, test the fates. But there is some crossover with Wargaming Tactica. Would there be value in 15-minute plays? Now, this backs up for a second. I do enjoy watching videos on YouTube about board gaming. Most of the time, it's like, let's kind of learn the rules. I get a new system, and I think I know how to play. I think I understand the rules, but let's watch a few playthroughs. There are also some YouTube channels that I enjoy the player personality. I enjoy the team, or I enjoy the YouTube presenter playing the game, and it's kind of fun to watch and see. And I find myself asking myself, okay, would I make that decision? I tend to be very not conservative in terms of playing board games. I will take risks. I will roll the dice. I will gamble everything away. So it's interesting to see those decisions. But from the perspective of Tactica, from the perspective of let's enjoy the narrative. An example, Runebound, because I love Runebound. Let's pull out Runebound and enjoy the narrative. But let's do a playthrough and ask these tactical questions. Let's talk about timers. Let's talk about optimization. Let's talk about controlling the random. Let's talk about leveraging the best equipment that you have. Let's talk about strategies, start of the game, mid-game, end game, and how certain strategies at the start of the game, if I don't do that, it hurts the end game. Let's talk about deployment. Deployment is big in wargaming. Deployment puts you in an advantage for the win, puts you for advantage at momentum. There's deployment in board gaming. Not only where you start, sometimes that's fixed based on the territory of the mission, but how you radiate out is that deployment. So I'm looking and saying, is there value in 15-minute plays? I could play through the whole game and we could watch for an hour and a half, but what I've looked at and talked about God Tier and other systems, if we're new to it, and I've talked about this in the PDF that I have on my site that you can download, the secret sauce to competitive gaming is to get good, is to literally play games and play them to the midpoint, play them a few rounds, stop, and then say, if this continued, most likely, yes, the dice can be swinging, yes, some stuff can happen, but if this continues, who would win the game? So play God Tier 2 turns. Ask yourself who would win the game. What that does is it teaches you early on maximum momentum, maximum moving through, but also it allows you to play multiple games in a very, very short time frame. Now, when we're doing that, I did that with Warhammer 40,000 tournament prep. That's what catapulted me locally. X-Wing miniatures. Kind of don't really talk about X-Wing miniatures too much because that's like my secret sauce, my secret weapon. But I am very competitive and in the competitive community with X-Wing. I use that Tactica to literally play quick games. It's not really fun. It's not really narrative. It's like we're training. It's like we're lifting weights. I'm piling on all that metal, all those metal models, and like lifting weights and getting diesel. So that's the perspective from there. But what about just playing a board game, 15 minutes? What are we going to play this week? Let's pull it down. Let's set it up. Let's play a couple of turns and ask the questions together. Analyze it real time from that Tactica. So exploring that. Dungeons and Dragons. Now, certainly on my channel, I have a good amount of D&D videos and vlogs under the Dungeons and Dragons playlist. There's a couple of popular videos there that, for whatever reason, the YouTube algorithms were like, we're gonna spike this a little bit. But the D&D that I put out is really a subset of my channel, and that's kind of a hard thing to capture because Dungeons and Dragons is a very, very influential part of my life. It has been the narrative, but also there is some tactica in playing Dungeons and Dragons, knowing the character classes, trying to figure out the dungeon master, trying to see these different areas of how things work. I mean, to say that it hasn't influenced and made me a better wargamer is key. So I try to share those D&D experiences, and I try to share and push those out. And again, I appreciate the feedback. But in terms of searchability and in terms of those pulling in new viewers, it's a very, very low amount, because the D&D, Dungeons and Dragons community on YouTube is, you want to talk about competitive, you want to talk about difficult to break into, you want to talk about like super established by the powers that be. Yes, it's very, very powerful. So those videos I post, they're kind of for me. They're kind of for you. It's a stream of consciousness. But that doesn't mean I don't want to do something with them. So I'm looking and saying, well, what more for D&D could we do? Could we run through some playthroughs? Could we run through some encounters? I've got a lot of miniatures, a lot of D&D miniatures, set up a D&D encounter, pull out, I have to be careful, no spoilers. I was originally thinking, we'll pull out some of the adventure books, but those could be used by DMs. So maybe, or they could right now, you could be right in the middle of playing Curse, and I pull out an encounter from that, and you're like, thanks a lot, Fritz, now I can't unsee this. But maybe what we could do is pull out some older adventures that I've enjoyed, set up the encounter, and say, okay, from the perspective of the DM, here we go, let's film it. From the perspective of the DM, what am I looking at? What am I going to try and do from the perspective of the players? So maybe we can get a little more tactical with D&D. Another thing I have thought about doing from time to time, just because why not? Why not? With wargaming miniatures, I'm always trying to push my miniature collection to the limit. I have all these miniatures. Let's play big games. Let's play different games. Let's explore. Let's get them on the table. We'll worry about balance and rules. Let's get them on the table. There's many, many times with Warhammer 40,000 where players have shown up with new models. Or we had one player, I was playing my Space Marines. My opponent was playing Tyranids, I believe. And we had a friend show up with a couple of new Tyranids that they had painted up, just to show off, like, Carnifex or Hive Tyrant. And it was like, dude, those are so awesome. Get them on the table right now. Just put them on the Tyranid side, and you guys control that. And it's like, well, what about balance? What about points? Doesn't matter. You brought models to the club. You showed up. Like, they got to get on the table. Let's try them out. So I'm constantly, that's my motivation. That's the focus. Let's push out. Let's make happen something on the table. So in exploring that perspective from D&D, I've got the books, I've got the stuff. I've always wanted to explore different ways of playing D&D. I tried playing Twitter D&D. Okay, didn't quite work out as expected, but it was kind of interesting. I've kicked around from time to time. What about playing D&D over YouTube? I mean, could it be done? Could it be a video vlog of showing the maps and showing kind of the narrative of the story, and I'm narrating that? And then in the comments, you kind of post what you want your character to do. You kind of post some thoughts, some Q&A questions, and I can answer a few, or then, of course, posting the next adventure video, answer them and resolve them. I don't know. How would that work? I'm always willing to kind of take that next step and try it out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But as a dungeon master, you always learn. I mean, I learned a lot years ago running like a 20-player game as a co-DM and a number one DM, literally one DM running the adventure on one side of the table. I'm the DM on the other side of the table, taking care of initiative, taking care of questions, keeping it flowing. I won't say I'm ready to do that again, but it was interesting. So there's always this capacity to experiment and have no expectations and see where it goes. So I'm feeling a little bit of that vibe. I want to do something. I want to do something with D&D. I want to roll those dice. The last feature, then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Everything is on the table. I want to start launching a mailbag. Specifically aiming, what I try to do is post a video, post a vlog about something, take into account the comments, the questions, and see, like, can we cover part of this, or can we cover aspects of this in upcoming videos, like this stream of consciousness? But what about having a dedicated mailbag? A dedicated mailbag? Because if I post up a BattleTech vlog, there's going to be some questions, some feedback, some comments. I'm going to try and roll that into the next BattleTech vlog, or make a note like, hey, we got to start talking about hover units. Because there's been a couple of not only good questions, like, Fritz, what about this? What about that? Some very experienced BattleTech players on the channel here, leaving that Tactica, I'm like, you know what, we need to open up and start talking about hovers. So that's now leading into a whole series of hover discussions that's going to be deploying out. Mech Command is going to be deploying them out as we move forward. But that's focused just on BattleTech. Maybe you have a question about something else. Or maybe it's like, Fritz, have you been thinking about this? And I haven't, but now I can, and we can grow. So I'm going to look to do a weekly mailbag. I'm going to post up a vlog, and the first one will get us started. Hey, this is the mailbag. So in the comment section, write down your questions. Write down those questions. I'm going to pull as many as I can. I'm going to combine as many as I can. We're going to use that to make a mailbag. I'm going to answer those questions. And then that video that gets posted, new comments appear. So it's going to kind of be this rolling thing, and I'm going to try and drop it once a week. I'll aim for Saturdays, because I think it'll be a little bit longer. I think it'll be a little bit longer in terms of, I don't want to say a podcast, but that could, because there's a couple of partners I want to pull in. We'll see where it organically goes, where it evolves. But pull it in on Saturday, because if it's a little bit longer, it gives you a chance to listen, or just kind of move into the pieces that you want. And of course, maybe I can put in the exact time pieces for specific questions, just to make that a little bit more accessible. But I want to move ahead and see where we can go organically with a mailbag. So I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to open it up to the comments, questions, and look to take those next steps, see what we can do. And of course, as always, continuing with BattleTech, continuing with Wargaming, continuing with Chain of Command, God Tier, D&D, board games, all this type of stuff, and keep pushing that on the channel.